Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Fraud Watch Friday for June. Glad you are with us. And with us, as always, is Kay Tomlinson, our fraud expert. Hi, Kay. How are things with you today?
Doing very well, really enjoying some of the sunshine that's out there, but I have to admit, I'm not looking forward to the very hot weather. I'm kind of wimpy.
Yeah, well, it's also World Cup Friday. The U.S. is playing Australia today.
Yay.
So I'm going to watch on TV. I'm not going into Seattle for sure. But we are going to get started with our program today. We're going to be talking about family caregivers in relation to fraud, and family caregiving is a big area of emphasis, and also has a lot of fraud potential. So, Kay, why don't you take it away?
Okay, very good. Thanks, Bruce. And thanks everybody for joining us this morning on such a lovely day outside. Trying not to look out the window here. And so this is really important information. And I really appreciate, again, you joining us to talk about this, whether you're a caregiver or not. And I can tell you, we never know when we might become a caregiver. This is a topic that's close to home for so many families. You might be one of those families. My family is included in this. So today we're going to talk about how caregivers can protect their loved ones from scams and financial exploitation. And I know and appreciate that not every caregiver is actually caring for a family member. It might be a friend, it might be a coworker, you might be a professional. And so today, even though we're focused on family, all of this information applies to every scenario. Bottom line, we need to protect those that we love from scams and fraud, right? And scammers, of course, are getting more sophisticated. They're more patient. They're more manipulative. Manipulative. And so with artificial intelligence, we know that, fraudsters are more believable and unfortunately, they're more efficient. And as caregivers, there are some basic fraud facts that we need to know. Plus, there's some questions that we need to ask for ourselves and for our loved ones. For example, why are older adults targeted, and how might scammers approach or isolate my loved one as a victim? What are the warning signs of fraud that I should watch out for as a caregiver? And if my loved one is being scammed, how can I intervene safely? And how can I best support them emotionally if they've been victimized by a scam? Finally, and this scenario does happen more than we think it might, what should I do if my loved one just doesn't believe they're being scammed? We're going to cover these topics today. And don't feel like you have to take notes. I have a handout that we'll send out after our session today. And then also a checklist if you're a caregiver of going through these points to be able to determine what's the next step for you and your family. So we need to realize and always sometimes remind ourselves that fraudsters and scammers are professionals and they know exactly who they're looking for. They invest time and strategy into building trust with their victims. And older adults are targeted for, of course, many reasons. One of these being that, well, we're typically raised to be trusting and polite. Your loved one might have recently lost a spouse, or, unbeknownst to you, they might be lonely. They might feel isolated. And older adults often, on one hand, have strong financial histories, but they might not be familiar with digital devices and especially the red flags of fraud. So scammers work to emotionally replace a victim's support system. That's you. This is grooming. It's powerful, it's intentional, and it's a slow, deliberate process. These scammers build trust through daily contact. And I've been told by caregivers of dementia patients in care facilities that some of these patients, excuse me, are being called and texted 20, 30, 50 plus times every single day by the fraudsters. They create this emotional dependence and they isolate the victim from family. They create urgency, but on the other hand, they create guilt when they're questioned by the victim. So, this emotional manipulation is often why victims, well, often defend the scammer, even against their own family. So, if you're a caregiver for a loved one, what are the warning signs that you should be watching for of fraud? And just as important, if your loved one lives in a continuous care or assisted living facility, what warning signs should those caregivers at the facility be aware of? You need to talk with them. What are some red flags that could indicate potential fraud? So, behavioral changes in your loved one are very telling. If your loved one starts to withdraw from family, if they become secretive about their phone or their online activity when maybe they've been very open talking about it in the past, they might display anxiety or agitation, or they might even get very angry if they're asked to discuss finances. And you might notice those financial changes not just in their behavior, but when you're looking at their accounts as well. There might be unusual withdrawals, new credit cards or accounts that are being opened. You might see checks that have been written and labeled loan or gift, or they might be made out to somebody's name or a company that you don't recognize. There might be communication red flags. Your loved one might mention a new friend that they've never met in person, but when you ask about who these people are, excuse me, they might be secretive about the details. They might they might share that someone is asking for money or documents or photos, but they need your help to do that and set it up. Or they might ask for help downloading a new communication app on their phone so they can talk to their new friend. And phones, there's technology red flags as well. But really, it's not just with their phones, but tablets, laptops, desktops, anywhere technology is being used. You might look at their phone and see a call log of lots of unknown phone numbers or names recently. And, a volunteer, excuse me, goodness, excuse me. You can tell this topic really gets to me. Um, our volunteer who is especially active in working with elected officials to ban crypto ATMs sent me an email this morning. And Dan, I saw that you're on the call this morning. Thank you. Sign up for the do not call list for your loved one. And I know a lot of people say, oh, does that even work? That's not going to stop the fraudsters. But keep in mind that scammers and fraudsters and criminals can spoof the names of real companies to where it looks like you're getting a call from Amazon. Of course, the number being used isn't really Amazon, but it looks like Amazon. And so the temptation to answer is great. Um, if you're signed up for the do not call list, you know that Amazon can't call you because they're a commercial company. So take those steps as well. And so, there are some red flags that really need a prompt response that you need to take immediately to protect your loved one. These are scenarios that are so urgent, immediate intervention is really indicated. If you see that large sums of money are being transferred, or your loved one talks about making plans to travel to meet to someone and they're leaving soon, you need to act immediately. If your loved one is sharing identity or legal documents or passwords, and if they're taking out loans to give money to someone, or if they're accessing their retirement accounts. And finally, and maybe most importantly, of course, if there are threats from the scammer to the victim, friends, family, even pets, under any circumstances, immediate action is called for. And yes, fraudsters actually will threaten harm if the victim is saying they can't provide money anymore. All of these and any of these scenarios, you need to contact the local police, contact the bank, freeze all of their accounts, credit card companies. If your loved one is in a care facility, talk with management. And you might want to talk with Adult Protective Services or the area agencies on aging for references to resources if your loved one is in a care facility. And of course, what what do we always say on Fraud Watch Friday? Contact the Fraud Watch Network helpline, 877-908-3360. And Bruce, I know you put that number in the chat for us to have so folks can write it down. But what happens if or when you realize, or your loved one realizes that they've been scammed and you've taken steps, you're working with the police, excuse me, the facility management, etc. And if if scenario applies, and bank and financial accounts. But, how can you support your loved one emotionally? This is a traumatic event. The most important thing that you can say is, I'm sorry this happened. We'll figure this out together, because the victim, your loved one, is likely going to feel shame or guilt. They might feel anger, not just at the scammer, but there may be scenarios where they're angry at you or family members as well for disrupting what has been happening. They may feel grief, loss of their savings, loss of assets, loss of trust, and they might feel fear of communicating with others, fear of harm to themselves, family members, friends, and depending on the communication and threats from the scammers. Or they might be afraid of family members taking over all of their accounts and losing their independence. I can't begin to tell you how many times when talking with groups about fraud presentations, I mention the number of victims who won't even share that they've been scammed with their families. Depending on the amount, they don't care about the money. They don't want their kids to come in and take over managing their finances because they think that they can't do it themselves anymore. Every time I mention this, in every single audience, the heads are shaking. Yep, that's exactly what I would do. I wouldn't tell anybody because my kids are going to take over everything and I lose my independence. Our role as caregivers, family members, support people is to stay patient. Hard to do sometimes. Avoid saying, I told you so. Don't blame or shame. Say, I'm worried about you. Don't say, how could you not see this? Don't say, what were you thinking? I told you so. Can you tell the difference in your reaction to those two comments? Help with practical recovery steps after a fraud. Involve them if possible, setting up protections. Watch for depression and anxiety. And, if they're open to sharing their story, let them do so. It might be empowering for them by feeling that they're protecting others from the same or similar thing that happened to them. So just very briefly, What do you do if they don't believe you? Even in the face of evidence, and this absolutely can and does happen. What do you do? And this is one of the hardest parts for caregivers. Approach the discussion about the fraud and show evidence gently. Do reverse image search photos. Look up the scammer's name online. Show similar scam stories and do this together with your loved one. Consider having another trusted adult talk with the victim. Separate family member, a faith leader, even a police. Document the victim's relationship with the scammer. And I really like this one. Work together to compile a promises made, promises kept list. And many times this can help them see inconsistencies that have developed over time they might not be aware of and they just might not recognize. And finally, let them process what's happened without demanding answers or agreement at every turn. They really might just need some time before they're ready to accept the truth. Remember, victims often feel embarrassed, ashamed, afraid of losing independence. Patience and compassion keeps the door open to further conversation. So let's go back to the beginning as we're wrapping this up. What practical protections, what concrete steps can caregivers and families take to protect their loved one right now? Set up protections with their phone and the technology that they use. We always advise, of course, you've heard it before if you've joined us before, advise your loved one not to let all phone calls go to voicemail. Harder than it sounds, I know. Use call blocking tools and services to contact their service provider to check into low or low cost services. Set their phone to automatically direct calls to voicemail if they're not included in their contact list. It's a little different process with each phone, but it's easy to do. You can Google how to do it. Easy to set up. And label contacts clearly in their phone. Pharmacy, doctor, neighbor. And another hard step to take, consider removing or limiting access to social media. Again, it depends on the situation. And yes, it's harder than it sounds because many older adults are all about social media, socializing, communicating, online shopping. Seems we're all online anymore. At the very least, make sure the privacy settings for each social media account being used is set to maximum. And conversation tools. If your loved one insists on answering the phone and they just can't hang up, which many people have told me is the case, create a refusal script for your loved one and practice it. Call them with your phone, have them answer, and have them practice saying, "No, hang up," while you're still talking, pretending to be the fraudster. Practice, "I don't give information out over the phone." Hang up. "Please remove me from your list." Hang up, even if the person is still talking. Practicing that a few times might sound kind of silly. It really helps. Freeze their credit with all 3 credit reporting agencies. And you might say, well, they're not going to be buying anything on credit. Why should I need to take those steps? You don't know how a scammer might manipulate them. It's the number one thing you can do to protect them if their ID's stolen or given freely to a fraudster. Set up alerts on all of their accounts, credit cards if they have them, checking, savings, investments. Then they and you, if you're on the account, will get a text anytime there's activity on that account. And set up direct deposit. Of course, you have to do that now with Social Security, but set up automatic bill pay too for any ongoing payment. Takes it out of everybody's hands. And something that you might not think about, but can be very important. Think about environmental safeguards for your loved one. And I'm not talking about, rails in the shower. Have mail forwarded to a trusted family member who can review what they're getting and then hand deliver it to your loved one rather than having mail delivered directly to them, whether it's living independently or in a care facility, because mail fraud still happens. Snail mail fraud, still a thing. Remove any documents that have account numbers from their home or from their facility room, so they can't share those account numbers with anybody who's calling them. And absolutely build relationships with those caregivers, neighbors, bank staff. We're all watching out for each other. We all want to do that because we know that scammers are relentless, right? But we can protect our loved ones and help keep them safe and independent, but still connected while we're caring for their needs with patience and compassion. We just need to remember the right tools. So, as I said, you're going to get a handout with all of this information. I appreciate that it's kind of a fire hose all at once of a lot of info, but you're going to get a handout that recaps this, plus a checklist so you can go through each item in each section and see, is this something that I need to do to help and care for my loved one? So neither one of us have to worry. We still need to be on watch, but it takes away some of the worry and adds those protections. So you'll be getting those along with the survey that we would ask you to go ahead and complete. We appreciate your feedback. And I just want to let everybody know that this coming November is a caregiver focus month for AARP. So we are looking at having a representative from the Alzheimer's Association join us to talk about caregiving, what it means for those with dementia, Alzheimer's, and how we also need to be watching and taking protection steps for our loved ones in those specific scenarios as well. I know it's going to be very enlightening for all of us. Again, I appreciate not everybody's a caregiver right now. I also appreciate and know personally that we just don't know when that might happen. So, Bruce, that's a lot of information that, as I said, we're going to be sharing that with handouts later. Um, any, do we have any questions?
Well, yeah, and the handouts will come in an email, a follow-up email that will come early next week. And, I also just wanted to mention that, the advice for, advising someone that you're caregiving for is kind of the same advice that you could share just with your friends and contacts, because one of the reasons that we do Fraud Watch Right is to spread the word on different things that are happening and different tips to protect yourself because there's always new things to watch out for or new steps you can take to make yourself safer. And John has a question that kind of touches on what you're talking about with the do not call list. Yes, is there any way to stop unwanted phone calls? And that's always a good question because it's not a yes and no answer. It's a little bit nuanced. But could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Bruce. It's not yes or no, it's kinda. It is really the answer. And, as I mentioned, and as Dan Mall shared with me this morning, and the reaction I always get when I talk with folks about fraud and scams, and I mention the do not call list, usually it's, but really it does help. It cuts down on unwanted calls. Of course, you're still going to get calls from charitable organizations, political organizations and elected officials sending out voicemails, vote for me in November kind of thing. So you're still going to get those calls that come through the do not call list, but it does help when scammers are spoofing, saying that they are with a company that should be blocked with the do not call list. And as I mentioned, contact the service provider for yourself, your loved one, your family, friends, and check to see what call blocking features they have and what's available directly on your phone. And so, many times it might say potential scam in the caller ID on your cell phone. It might say something else if it's being spoofed, but there are call blocking measures that each company has in place and that phones have in place that you can use. It's hard to go into each one or do saying something general. They're all a little bit different. So to me, the best advice is to contact the service provider. But as I also mentioned, there are third-party companies. Some have free call blocking services. Some have low cost, 2.99 a month kind of type of thing for call blocking. And then you can also set your phone to set calls that come in to go directly to voicemail. Your phone won't even ring. You'll get a call, they'll get your voicemail message, it goes to voicemail, and then you or your loved one can review their voicemail when they have a chance. And I can tell you, we have a landline and as well as our cell phones, and our landline gets many fraud calls, from New Jersey and California and Florida, for all over the country. And those calls, which I'm pretty sure are likely scams, they never leave a message. And so very likely they're not gonna leave a message on a cell phone either. I don't know that for a fact, but again, you're listening to voicemail, you can decide what you wanna do from there. But at least the phone won't be ringing, nothing to answer if you're worried about, um one lady came up to me at, a presentation, and, she was fine, she felt, but her husband answered every call that came on his phone and just loved and loved and loved to talk to whoever was on the other end and gave them information to no end. And she was beside herself because she couldn't convince him to stop doing that. So I told him, "Practice, you know, um, answering, having a script. This is what I'm gonna say every time," and then hang up. He's been polite, he hasn't been rude, he's answered, and now he's gonna hang up.
Okay, well, that sounds like good advice. Carlos, you have your hand up. Did you have a
I
question?
do. I do. Thank you. Amazing information, and everything else. A couple of things, about three or four. As far as create refusal script, my brother-in-law, God rest his soul, was a volunteer police officer, and he had the title of officer as such. So when he answered the phone, he would say, "Good morning, Officer Tyler speaking. May I help you?" And you get click right away because they thought it was.
Like,
And the same
I love
person,
that.
yeah, and the same person, Tyler Ridge, God rest his soul, was kind of a jokester sometimes, and he'd answer and he says, "Fitzgerald's, funeral home, have you tried our layaway plan?" And again, click, okay? Again, kind of funny, and he goes. I'd like to tell you that I don't know that, no call or no block or don't call and report really works. For me, it doesn't. I get the same call over and over again from everywhere in the United States and
Mhm.
sometimes outside of it as well. The last thing I'd like for you to do is comment, and he goes, "Sometimes the fraudsters are internal. They can be family members, and I don't think, Kay, that you address that.
Right.
So we have to be cautious of that, simply because I think in our family we've experienced that with a family member that was writing checks on behalf of my in-laws and just, taking advantage of them. So I'd like for you to comment on those kinds of situations. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Carlos. And you've brought up a very, very important point regarding financial exploitation. And that involves many, many times family members, close friends. It unfortunately might be a guardian. It might be someone at a care facility. But when it's family members, it's extremely difficult. And it's, and it's hard because the red flags that we talked about are things that you can approach because there's some open communication at some point with your family member. If a family member is the one that is exploiting the victim, your loved one, now it might be clouded in secrecy. Other family members might come forward and ask what's happening. Well, why can't we come and see mom? Why won't mom talk about this? Why won't you share information with me about that? Or if you have questions, why are the balances of these accounts being depleted? And then you're not getting sufficient answers. It's very difficult, but all of those things in and of themselves are red flags. And so it's difficult because if the bonus answer, it would be, yay, have more than one family member sharing, taking care of, and being with, and attending your loved one to provide care. It might be this person's in charge of communication, this person's in charge of the financial accounts, this person's in charge of this, and that group gets together on a regular basis and shares that information. It's what AARP recommends if you're preparing to care for someone that needs to go in a facility, has diminishing capacity, that type of thing. But again, if you run into the scenario of it's one person and one person only that is doing the caring, then there's the potential of having to go to talk with law enforcement, talk with facilities, trying to gather evidence. And it's what you don't want to do because it's a family member. Do you want to take legal action to try to get information? Do you want to go to the bank and try to be assigned and have your loved one sign something if they're allowed to, because they might be being controlled? You can tell there's a lot of aspects, and I know that you've probably run into all of these, Carlos. It's a very difficult situation if there's just one person involved controlling the situation. And again, it might not be a family member. It might be a different caregiver, and it might be someone from an outside agency that comes into the home to provide care, and now they're controlling and stealing, as you mentioned, writing checks to themselves off of the account. So it's, question, 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 get advice from either an attorney, an elder law attorney, if needed, talk with the police if needed in terms of next steps, contact the Fraud Watch Network helpline. They can also give you resources. Area agencies on aging can also put you in touch with groups that can help in these scenarios that are nonprofit and can assist. It's difficult because you're taking steps and your heart's breaking at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that Dan makes a good point about answering scam calls, is that can set you up to receive even more calls because your number
Yes.
gets sold. Um, so can you talk a little bit about that, Gary, about how about why that is the case?
I'm sorry, would you repeat the last part, Bruce?
Just that when you answer the phone and talk to scammers, that information gets passed around among the scammers that you are a live person who will answer the phone, and that can lead to getting more calls from scammers.
Yep. Absolutely. Once you answer the phone, the scammer knows that we've got a live one. because you're answering the phone. That's a good number with a real person on the other end of it. And if you start chatting and carrying on a conversation and getting involved, even if you're not sharing information at that point, the scammer on the other end knows that now we've really got a live one, because now they're going to converse with us. And that is information that is available to sell. It's valuable to that scammer. But more and more often, rather than having somebody call you from a boiler room in another country or wherever, and talking to you on a headset person to person, still happens all the time. More often now is you're being called by an AI generated chatbot who can carry on a conversation with you, can answer questions, can ask you questions. Whatever you come up with, it's going to answer emotions, the real thing. It's going to sound like a real person. Might sound like your grandson, Bobby. But again, it could be an AI chatbot that you're visiting with on this call. And all of that information goes into the learning model of the artificial intelligence programming being used. And so now, not only are you a live one because it's a real phone number with a person, you're really a live one because you're going to have a conversation with them. But all that information that you're sharing, that's out there for every other background person calling with their chatbots, part of that AI programming. They know all of that information about you because it's part of the large language model in that AI programming. So if you've shared some information personally, that's out there too. And it's
Yeah,
available.
yeah, there are people in the fraud world who basically earn their money not by doing frauds, but by facilitating them by selling lists. And they act as data brokers. So yeah, it definitely makes your life easier to have those people have as little information as possible about you. DM has a comment about tips for mailing old school checks using non-erasable ink, and
Mhm.
and has a actual model of pen there to avoid check washing, which is kind of erasing checks. If your mail is stolen, and they talk about stolen postal service master keys, which can happen. But also, a lot of people don't have locking mailboxes and just get their mailbox. That the scammer doesn't have to break in; they just come and steal it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and check washing is absolutely a thing. The pen that DM mentioned, yep, not erasable, but also there's chemicals that can wash that off as well, even if it is erasable or a non-erasable rather pen. Chemicals can still, in some cases, wash that off. And there's also pens that you can buy that can avoid that if you really want to write checks. It's difficult because, as I said, believe me when I tell you, snail mail fraud is absolutely an issue. USPS has multiple postal inspectors that do nothing but track mail fraud. And it's I always tell people, including my husband, that anytime that you're writing a check to somebody, you're giving not just the opportunity for them to wash that check and fill in their own name and their own dollar amount, and it's going to come out of your account. You're giving them your account number and the routing number for your checking account. It's right there on the bottom of the check. And your name and address and maybe phone number as well. So it's a plethora of information that you're providing, which is why we always recommend to If you're going to buy stuff either online or at the store, the pharmacy, use a credit card. Use the same card for all of that activity. If you're paying bills, pay your bills online. It's very, very easy to do and very secure as long as you keep your security software on your device up to date. And we always, of course, recommend a virtual private network to kind of mask where you're coming and going when you pay those bills. Super easy to do. And I have to admit, very fast. But again, if I'm at the pharmacy, I don't want to write a check for something and then give it to the pharmacy attendant, and then it's going to sit there, and then they're going to mail it away, or they're going to electronically deposit it in their lockbox account at their bank. Now they've got your check. You're trusting they're going to destroy it appropriately. That was kind of a long answer, Bruce.
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, I don't see any more questions, but I think you had another topic you had just heard about. Is that right? That you wanted to
I
let people know
do.
about?
I do. I'm going to open my notes because this is really important. I wanted to share this. This is fairly new. This past week, I was on a quarterly call, consumer protection type of call, where representatives from the Department of Financial Institutions here in Washington, several from the Attorney General's office, other agencies, L&I, just most of the agencies in Washington have representatives that join this call every quarter. There's usually about 20 of us that join, and it's hosted by the Better Business Bureau's fraud division here in Washington. And so we all basically share kind of what's happening in our worlds, you might say. And I'm there on behalf of AARP. And the representative from the Department of Financial Institutions, DFI, had shared a scheme that they're extremely worried about and have issued warnings about, and warnings at their highest level. It's a multi-level marketing scheme, which is kind of a takeoff and an evolution of the investment scams. And it's really talking about a company, and I'll share the company because alerts have gone out on publicly several times on this, and it's called BG Wealth Sharing Limited, BG Wealth. But even under a few other names that they're under which they're operating, it's an investment group that claims to be the world's largest hedge fund. And they're supposedly associated with a cryptocurrency trading platform exchange. They make their contacts through social media. They're incorporated in the state of Colorado. Most of their frauds are here in Washington and in Colorado, but they're expanding. And what they do is they encourage investors, once they convince an investor to invest with them, promising zero risk, but big returns. Okay, red flag right there. Zero risk. All investments carry a certain amount of risk. And that they encourage existing investors to go out and recruit new investors, people that they know, encourage investors, and they promised that that original investor is going to get even bigger earnings. Not only are the people they're encouraging now to invest in their little group, this is the Ponzi scheme aspect, they're going to make good money, but wow, as the original investor going out and getting more people, you're going to really make a lot of money. This group falsely claims to be licensed by the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and they tell investors, hey, here's our information, go check us out. You are going to see that we're listed. You know, we're licensed, we're good. But in reality, they've filed a couple of very inconsequential type of filings with the SEC that has nothing to do with them being either licensed or accredited as an investment firm. So warnings have gone out in May, increased warnings have gone out in April, and they are now expanding, saying that you can make even more money, but you need to pay an advance fee for taxes. So, it could be, part of an government investigation, oh, looks like we're going to be investigated, which is fine because we're legit, but we need you to pay this fee. Or before you've even invested anything, you need to pay a fee. So that's an advanced fee scam. But again, these people are actively recruiting investors in this cryptocurrency platform. People are not getting their money back when they try to withdraw their funds. There's multiple claims with the government agencies that people are being defrauded. And this is an ongoing investigation of these people and this organization to try to track this down. And so our DFI representative, Nathan Spiker, was able to give us kind of this information. If you go online, do a web search on BG Wells, followed by the name of scams, you're going to get a lot of information. But again, basic fraud protections apply. If you're approached to invest in cryptocurrency, DFI is saying, yes, do your research and really research who these people are, especially if you've been approached over social media. And also if they want to do all their communications through channels like WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram. Also red flags. DFI is saying, don't stop there. Call the Department of Financial Institutions directly here in Washington State and tell them you've been approached. You want to check out this company because it is so convoluted. I can tell you from what Nathan said on our call, it would make your head spin. He said, it's not realistic for the public to know all of this intricate SEC information. Tell people to just call the Department of Financial Institutions. So again, frightening new scam that people are being approached. And now DFI is getting reports that this group is approaching faith-based organizations, going to ministers, saying, here's the opportunity to make this money for your church and your congregation. You're going to make even more if you go to your parishioners and convince them to invest as well. This is going to really help your faith organization. So again, very difficult. Faith-based organizations, tendency to trust. BG Wells, absolutely a scam organization.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a good thing to be aware of, because these sort of investment schemes, like, can be Ponzi schemes or just multi-level marketing type of things. They always sound good, but it's kind of like the too good to be true element, that if it's really that easy to make money, why isn't everybody doing it? Why is it only for you?
Right,
Uh,
right.
So yeah, all right. Well, certainly good to be aware. And you'd say, well, these are old schemes. But kind of like the mailbox scheme, as Carlos mentioned, there are rings that go out with chains and trucks and pull the mailboxes down. So even if you have a locking mailbox, if you're hit with that and you go, wow, that sounds like a lot of trouble, but it's worth it. And if you're on like the Nextdoor app, I periodically see people who are reporting that it's happened in their neighborhood. So So it absolutely does still happen. All types of scams, really, since I've gotten involved with scams, there's no scam that goes away. It just seems to change and gets a more modern twist. But a lot of times the basics are the same, and oftentimes the psychology is the same.
Yeah.
So that's why we try and teach principles where if the scam is different, if it comes in a new if it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, like the clothing may change, but the wolf is kind of the same.
Right.
um so it isn't so much you need to learn about every scam that's out there, but a lot of times you can recognize a scam just from the elements that are in it. And if you can make money really easily with no risk and nobody else knows about it, and they've contacted you for this great opportunity, that is always a red flag.
Yep.
I know I'm not the sort of person who gets real insider information to make money. Nobody contacts me for that, and probably not for any of us. DM has got a comment that received a letter from OWLUE LEC offering to appeal property tax. I think I got one of those too.
Oh,
A service or a law firm that will bring your property taxes down, and was going to cut the value of my house like in half. I thought, I don't think they can really do
wow.
that. And the comment that DM has, it sounds like an opportunity for title fraud.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, and well, as Paul says, they're likely looking for your information for identity theft. That's always a possibility. But you don't need an outside law firm, um, even if they're a real law firm, to help you appeal property tax. Go to your county assessor online or call them and say that you want to question and appeal the value of your property tax because you don't think it's correct, or you think there may have been an error, or for any reason. And there is an appeals process to dispute or appeal the valuation of your property tax. There's no charge for that. And so, I would tend to just throw any of those letters away rather than contacting them, or even reaching out to an attorney that is a real attorney and ask them about it, because, well, that there's going to be a fee, right? You're going to have to pay. Why do you want to pay if you can do it for free through the county? And go through that process. They might tell you, we can get results where the county will say, no, we won't lower your property tax, but, you know, it's still going to cost you. And if the county is going to say no to you, they're going to say no to whoever else contacts them. If they even contact them, they might just be taking your money, as Paul said, and gathering your information. Keep in mind, as we said a couple months ago, if you happen to be with us, there is an issue about title fraud and a concern about that. Go to your county and either go online or call them and ask about notification for getting an email or a text. I think it's email for most counties, and see if they have the option to sign up for notifications. That's all you have to ask them. Or you can just do a search at your county assessor's website, notifications. And you can sign up to be notified if there's any type of filing or request for change on any of your legal documents on file with that county. Now, if it was you, great. Okay, yep, there, I did it last Tuesday. But if it's not you, now you're on notice and have been notified that somebody is trying to access your documents with the county, potential title fraud. So, yes, I would encourage everyone to take those steps. But yeah, I would just throw those letters away.
Yeah. That is kind of what I did. I mean, that sounds too good to be true. It's just with everything you hear about property taxes and home prices, the idea that my home is so overvalued when all the, I can see what other houses sell for. It's just not believable that they can, convince the county, of what they say they can. So,
Yep, yep. I would
um,
also encourage people to go in and look into at the county assessor's office property tax relief, because the regulations and the limits for your earned income have changed. And so if you've looked into this before, low income might mean one thing in one agency, one area. Property tax evaluation, the limits might mean something else. So you may qualify and not realize it, that you would qualify for property tax relief or reduction simply because of your earned income and other financial situations around your financial status. And so look at that. It's changed. I've got it on my to-do list here to look at so I can talk about it more appropriately. But I've been told by several people that those valuations have changed. So you might qualify for something now that you didn't even realize that's going to give you that property tax relief. Again, no charge, free. You don't need to pay somebody to help you do that. And if you have trouble filling out the forms or whatever, they'll help you do that. So you're good to go.
yeah, yeah, actually, I would say that the senior property tax exemption is a real thing. AARP has been very involved and advocate for that. And there was legislation passed this last legislative session that improved it, and I don't know enough about it to
Right.
really tell you about it, except that it exists. And just
Yeah.
so if you think you might um, qualify, it has to do with your age, it has to do with your income. But there is information on your county assessor's
Mhm.
website, and also at ARP as well. But you'll end up with your county assessor anyway, because as Kay says, the income limits and the rules are different in each county. I mean, not a lot different, but a little different.
Yeah.
So yeah, check that out. But as we say, be very wary of somebody who approaches you cold and says that they can help you with it,
Right.
because it's something you can do yourself, and you can get help from actual local organizations who will do it for free.
Mhm. Yep.
So so definitely start there. I just wanted to put next month we are going to have Detective Tim Schwering of the Spokane Police Department, and I put the link to register. If you want to save putting it on your to-do list, just go ahead and do it now, and then you'll be registered. That's July 17th. Detective Schwering's a very interesting guy. He spoke at our live event in Spokane, and he had a lot of information, and he's willing to share some inside information.
Yeah.
Some of it's a little scary, but he's definitely an expert on what local police can and will do about fraud and how you should approach them. I know John was talking about he was having difficulty with his local police, so you
Mhm.
could put that question to Detective Schwering and send and see what he would say. I know, he's one person in Spokane who's working on that, so he's very busy. Uh, so that's a great opportunity to hear him speak and ask questions of him if you've ever wanted to know how to protect yourself from fraud with your local police. So
Yep.
um, definitely come back and join us.
Yep.
Um, and then, like we always like to talk about the helpline, which is a free service. If you don't know about it, I mean, if you have fraud questions, you can call it and speak to a trained volunteer. I know there's a couple of them who are fraud fighters for ARP who are on the call, and we definitely appreciate you doing that.
Yep.
It's something our volunteers do from home. They just get a list of of questions and phone numbers, and they call people back, and they can give you personalized advice. It's not legal advice. It's just helping you take the next step,
Mhm.
um, to figure out if something is a fraud, or if it is, what you can do next. This is the AARP Fraud Watch Network website, which has all kinds of information on it. AARP has a big repository of fraud information now, so you can find answers to just about every question you might have there.
Mhm.
Although there's always new ones, so I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in volunteering to fight fraud or other aspects of ARP, there are many, in terms of advocating or educating on caregiving or housing. Social security, of course, is a big topic. You can send us an email at warb@arp.org. And one of the big things we do is our speakers bureau, and the Kay is very involved in that. Would you like to describe what that is?
Oh, sure, sure. Speakers Bureau is a group of speakers and support people who might not be so much into speaking, but who support the speakers that we visit care facilities, retirement, senior centers, um, uh, aging fairs type of thing. And we speak about a variety of topics. So, yes, fraud, but also brain health, caregiving, all of the topics that likely you might be interested in, decluttering. If you're getting ready for a move. So, a variety of topics. We go out and share information that AARP puts together for you. We have training, we support you going out and sharing a lot of important information, and it's really a fun way to socialize and get to know other folks interested in the topics that interest you, as well as go out and meet and visit with groups of people that are interested in your topic and have requested you to come and speak. So, yeah, go to the email that Bruce has provided if you have an interest in learning more. We'd love to share more with you. And I would also like to reiterate what Bruce mentioned about our next month's program. Detective Tim Schwering is an exceptional speaker. He's dynamic. He's going to have a presentation sharing information. And then he's going to take your questions. He is one of only two law enforcement officers in the state of Washington specifically trained to manage and handle and investigate cryptocurrency fraud. And he is exceptionally involved, along with our volunteer, Dan Mall, in meeting with elected officials in towns and cities across the state, working with them, sharing information, working with them to pass legislation to ban cryptocurrency ATMs in their city and their counties. So again, really encourage you to join us next month. We're very lucky to have him. He's exceptionally busy. And like I said, he's very engaging, very personable, very down to earth. And I know you'll enjoy hearing him speak and then having the opportunity to ask questions. I'm very excited that he's going to be joining us. He was really fun to work with at our Spokane Safety Day last month. So I really encourage you to join us.
All right. Well, I think with that, we are a little bit over time, and thank you to everyone for staying with us, and also for joining. And if you had a question you didn't ask, or you have something that you think of between now and July 17th, bring it to us. We would love to answer any questions that you have. This is a resource for you, and also an opportunity for us to learn what people are experiencing. So, um, thank you again. We will see you next month, and we will see you later.
Bye. See you, everyone.